Okay, and some more coming in. So look, we'll have people joining us as we go over the next few minutes, but we're going to get started if that's okay with everybody. We'll start kind of 4:11. We have a policy within the volunteer centre of not punishing the punctual. So those of you who turn up to things on time get to go through things in time as we're going. So these are all very welcome to the third day of our sessions as part of National Volunteer Week. And look, we're delighted, I suppose, today to have Daniel Connaghan from Birdwatch Ireland join us and Trish Murphy from Inishowen Rivers Trust. And I suppose we picked a number of themes for the week, and we were chatting just before we let you all in there, just about how kind of random and eclectic it is, but we do have some kind of a plan. So I suppose for National Volunteer Week this year, we went along a theme of kind of well-being and environment. The well-being aspect is just as we're all starting to emerge from COVID, I suppose there's kind of innate concerns that we have or kind of worries and just about going out and being social and being interactive again. So we started the week with a mindfulness session on that topic, just kind of encouraging people maybe to venture out when it's safe to do so. And then we had a number of other kind of sessions that had a social focus. We had storytelling last night. We have somebody doing cooking tomorrow. All sorts of kind of bits and pieces in between. And then on the environmental theme, I suppose we wanted to celebrate the fantastic work of Inishowen Rivers Trust, a group that we've been working with for a couple of years, and that we see just coming forward in leaps and strides and acting as a model, hopefully for the rest of the country to be able to actually get into this sort of rivers management piece that Trish will tell us all about. I'm just going to admit somebody else here. I can't multitask, I can't talk and admit people as we're going here. And then I suppose equally we wanted to get Daniel in and I suppose for our approach for the week, we've gone for people that are Donegal based. I think we have one person talking this week who is not based in Donegal. And I suppose we were delighted to find that Daniel was based down beside the beach in Falcara, just over the road from myself, and that he was available and happy to make himself available to do a talk for us on, I suppose, connecting with nature and that sort of whole, sorry, geez, they're coming in thick and fast now. Anyway, that's sort of whole piece of, connecting with nature and finding out, I suppose, about the birds and finding out a little bit more about the work that Daniel does. So for this morning, we're going to start with Trish, and we'll take questions as we go. There's a few of us here, so feel free. We're going to keep everybody muted while the talks are going on. But if you have something you want to ask or a comment you want to make, feel free to unmute yourself, and we'll go with that. When Trish is done, we will, I suppose, take a few questions or take a few comments if there are any, and then we'll pivot over to Daniel for his element of the talk as well. So, Trish, you should be able to share screen and Godspeed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. See if this works. Yeah. Okay. Can you all see that, everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Great. Well, thank you so much. Sorry, I've moved on here a little bit before I meant to. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming here today, and thank you very much to the Donegal Volunteer Centre for inviting us as well. My name is Trish Murphy, and I'm the Inishowen Rivers Trust Project Officer. So today I'm just going to talk about being down by the river and what we've been doing with our volunteers. And if anybody out there wants to volunteer with us, we'd be very welcome to have you. We do have a lot of volunteers from Inishowen, but also from beyond as well. And even down the country, people come up to us as well. So we're very welcome to have anybody join us at any time. So just to start off, I'll just let you know what a Rivers Trust is, because it's a fairly new concept in Ireland. A Rivers Trust is a community-led organisation of people that work on rivers and lakes and coastal areas. So we're very much practical people, and for that reason we've often been termed as people with wet feet. And you can see from our photographs that there's a good reason to call us that, because we do like to be in the river quite a bit. Now, there's a very diverse range of people get involved with us, the old and the young, every kind of walk of life. But the one thing we all have in common is that we all love to be out on the rivers, and we all love rivers. So just in terms of how many rivers trusts there are in Ireland, there are approximately 18 now. They're not all on this map, but we're all scattered around Ireland, and this map has mostly filled in the last 5 years. So in Donegal, we are the only trust in Donegal, but we're very much hoping that another one will start up, because it would be lovely to have some Rivers Trust neighbours as well. Now, there are quite a few in Northern Ireland, so there's 8 in Northern Ireland, and actually the Ballinderry Rivers Trust was the very, very first trust in Ireland, and also it was the first kind of organisation of this type between Ireland and the UK. So it actually started off in Cookstown over, almost 35 years ago. So the IRT itself, you all know where Inishowen is, but I thought just in case somebody from outside of Donegal was joining us this morning, I thought I'd put in the All Ireland map. So our office is based in Moville, and our journey began back in October 2013. We started off with a group of people that were working on a river path in Moville, and that project started in early 2013, but by the end of that, we'd heard about the concept of a trust, and we decided to look into it more. And that process took quite a while. It was very, very new. There was no other trusts operating in the Republic of Ireland at the time. And it took about 2 years. We went around chatting to people, and it wasn't until October 2015 that we established our first board. And even at that first board's task was to set us up as a company. So we were all volunteers. So the board is fully volunteer based, and we have 7 directors, and I'm the only staff member, and I've only been in for just about a year now. So we are supported and funded by a range of different people, including the Volunteer Centre, who, as John said, we've been collaborating with for the last few years. So what do we do? What do trusts do in general? So we go to agricultural shows, we do exhibitions, we do cleanups, so the practical things, the cleanups on the rivers, we do tree planting, and we do sampling on rivers. That's very important, and we provide training for that sampling. So we run lots of awareness events and kind of workshops, things where people can learn more about particular issues. We have a particular emphasis on flooding, which has come about really because of the terrible floods of 2017. And then we also talk about, restoring rivers and trying to bring them back up to our health, because, from an environmental perspective, our rivers are suffering quite badly at the moment and declining significantly. And over half of our rivers are in poor quality at the moment. So we engage a lot of volunteers with the Trust, and that's really, really important to us. The volunteers really are at the core of what we do. So, and there are lots of different reasons why people do get involved with us. A lot of people do it for the enjoyment and because they're passionate about the environment. Some people do it because they just want to learn more about a particular topic. Like we do range of topics. So we might do heritage on rivers. So somebody who's interested in heritage might come along to those kind of events, or some people just really like getting out tree planting, so they'll just come to that. But so there is a range of things that we offer to people. Other people come to us for occupational experience. So we would have people who want to get some practical experience in a particular topic. We have students, we have 3 placement students at the moment. And then we train people as well. So, and that's very useful for people going on if, for instance, they want to go to university to study the environment, or we're looking to get a job in a particular field. That's very useful, and volunteering is always a great way to get that experience under your belt. So health and well-being is a core thing and a core theme of National Volunteer Week. So for us, we love it, and our volunteers love it, because we get told that all the time, that they just love being outside with us. And we try to cater for the volunteers, providing equipment and health and safety advice, and also the very important cup of tea while we're out. So what are the benefits for engaging for all parties involved here? We find that it really very much improves our communication, because we're dealing with lots of different people. We've got landowners and environmentalists and just people who just want to get out and meet others, and it creates that conversation. And so when we're doing a bit of work, people are chatting away about everything and anything, and it is a great way to unwind from quite often our busy lives. It also very much helps the work that we do on the rivers, because it helps us to identify the right solutions for the right place. So, if we're on a particular stretch of river, we might hear about another challenge that's upstream, and so that kind of helps us go, oh right, maybe we could go and help out up there. So this is um, the kind of way that it's like a referral system in a way, but it's also the landowners getting engaged and the landowners seeing what can be done, and calling us in to help them with things as well. And that's when we call the volunteers in to help implement some type of solution. um, the volunteering also helps increase our knowledge, as we were saying. People do it for awareness as well, and it also increases our acceptance that our environment is in a crisis at the moment, particularly a biodiversity crisis, but also a climate crisis. And sometimes the information about that's out there is not necessarily very accurate or very applicable to where we are in particular. So there's a lot of sort of, we provide as accurate information as we can, and we do very much work on that. I'm a scientist by background, so I'm very, very keen on making sure that the facts that we put out there are accurate. And the work that we do also increases ownership. It increases ownership when we're working with landowners on what they're doing in their land, but it's also about how we manage our landscapes. So if you are there helping to manage that landscape, it gives you much more ownership and pride in what you're doing. So co-designing and co-producing things is a really core of what we do. And that development of partnerships, both with landowners and volunteers, and also the agencies who we work with, because we need permissions from them and they can provide very good scientific advice. This all leads to this kind of long-term benefits for the success of what we do. So for the volunteers, a few years ago, we sat back and thought, well, if we're asking people to do things, we need to provide them with as much information as possible about how to do it, why they're doing it, what are the benefits of doing it. So we came up with our Inishowen River Guardians program, so that people can sign up to be a river guardian. And you can be a river guardian of your own local river, or you can help out on other rivers. It encompasses everybody. So the volunteers help to restore and protect the natural water bodies, and we give them specialized training to do this. So they're engaging with water and they're increasing their skills, but they're developing these good working relationships between different groups, and they're building capacity to deliver on environmental improvements. So originally our Inishowen River Guardians program was funded by Leader. That was back in 2019. And this year we've been very lucky to get some funding from Rethink Ireland, who have been supporting our program for this summer. Now, here's some photographs of us back in 2019 when we were working on things. You can see it's all very practical, and a few of the courses will be certified as well, which is very useful. So, for instance, this is the chainsaw maintenance, use and maintenance. That's a certified course, and also the controlling invasives is a certified course, as is this electrofishing, which is the technique that we use to monitor the rivers, and that's a certified course as well. So our 2021 programme has just started there in March, and we have suffered from the lockdown. We would have preferred to have started earlier this year, but what we've been doing is we've been creating a programme of blended learning for people. So there is online material and there's outdoor as well. And so we're so delighted that we've now moved to 15 people outdoors, because we can start to get our outdoor courses up and running again, and we can start to call in our volunteers a bit more now. So we have a passport system for the volunteers. So you get a little passport when you sign up, and that's where you can keep track of what you've done with the trust, and it gets stamped. And if you get a certification number, you can keep all that safely within your passport. I mean, we maintain those records anyway, but this is for you, and the passport provides additional advice about little things about health and safety. There's a map in it, numbers to call, that kind of thing. So so these are the training courses that we've done or are doing. there's quite a range here, but you can see that a lot of them are very, very practical. You know, mapping is very useful for a lot of people. Monitoring on your rivers. We look at the river fly in particular, and anybody who's an angler will know about the fly. You'll see the fly above the river, but what we do is we look at the larval stages of those fly inside the river and sample those. We look at things like bank erosion. We're looking at, you know, for our flooding projects, we're looking at building leaky dams, because this is a technique that they use to slow the flow. We also are looking at woody debris in rivers and what's the right amount of woody debris in rivers. You get a lot of conversation about there's too much wood in the rivers, there's too much vegetation, and then at another level there's too little. So it's what's the right amount and how do we manage it? So, you know, we do lots of tree planting, and we do workshops around the tree planting as well, but we are doing aquatic plant identification too coming up, and also that you can see the health and safety ones that we provide as well. So I mentioned certification. This is very this is a very much a draw for a lot of our volunteers, because they can get certified in different techniques, and that might be very useful for them going forward. But it also means that you're getting a very high level of training too. And you know, the training courses are expensive, but they're expensive for us to run, but they're all free for our volunteers, and they are fantastic opportunities. Many of them are fantastic opportunities. So we also produce lots of little online forms for people to fill in, and this is one of the ways that volunteers engage with us. So I mentioned the riverfly sampling, and so that's where, so you can see here in the top two photographs, we've got a riverfly here that's emerged from the river, and is one of the things that the fish eat a lot of, and the birds as well. But this is what a riverfly can look like when it's young, you know, when it's in its larval stages, and it spends most of its life in this larval stage. So it could be over a year like this, and then spend a couple of days like this, like a fly out of the water. So this stage of the life cycle is very important, and also very useful for us, because they help us to understand about the health of the river. So we're looking at, you know, is this a healthy river? Do we get a nice wide range of bugs in it? And we also get bugs that don't like polluted rivers. So if you go into a river and you sample and you don't find what we call the good indicators, then you know that this river is suffering in some way. And then you know, that can set you off on a path of investigating why the river isn't so healthy. So we also do water chemistry. So we're really starting the water chemistry side of it this summer. And we'll have, you know, training coming up now shortly at the start of June with the EPA on this. And then we'll be giving out kits to people to do water sampling. And this is very useful for looking at maybe nitrates and phosphates in the water. And this is us just being trained over here. So data capture, I mentioned the online forms that we use. Well, we do, this is, you know, these forms are available for people to scan. So you can see here we use QR codes, so you can scan that with using your smartphone, and it pops up, the form will pop up on your phone, and then you can complete it. You can also just browse to it directly through a web address there. And then the data comes into us, and then that allows us to map, you know, things. So say, for instance, we're looking for Japanese knotweed. So we can map the Japanese knotweed around Inishowen. So the more people who use this, the better data that we get. And we can then issue these maps out to people. People can keep track of, you know, how the Japanese knotweed is going in their area, because we can compare year on year as well. So we also do other things like bridges. We like to look at bridges. Bridges are very important on the rivers, and culverts. So you can send in data about bridges. We count fish spawning nests, which is the red counts here, and then the riverfly can be done through the smartphone as well. But one of the things that we're really, really keen on is the nature-based solutions. And this is from the perspective of both flooding and for river restoration. And they are, you know, co-benefits of each other anyway. So when you are putting in natural flood management measures, you tend to be working a little bit on restoration within the river as well. So this is where we use natural materials, and we build things like revetments on the rivers, and we've been trained on this, and then we will pass on that training to our volunteers. And this work is great because it's very sensitive to the environment. We're not putting in hard structures. We try to keep it completely nature-based, and that really helps for the resilience of not only the structures that we build, but also the resilience of the landscape to things like climate change and flooding. So here's an example of what we've done. So in 2017, we would do a walkover. So we do walkovers as well, and volunteers can come on this, where we record on the rivers with the permissions of the landowners. We walk through across the land, and we just observe the river based on our knowledge that we've gained over the years. And then in 2018, we went back and we built this revetment in the stream. So we did this. There was this site, the previous site I just showed you in the last slide is just up here. And this is the second part of it here that we were working on. So you can see it was all hand done. We used brash and willow to build up the bank here. The landowner had a significant erosion problem, and this is it 2 years later. So you can see how much it's developed and how much it has improved, and it improved the water quality after this event, after this restoration. We had fish spawning in this part of the river then afterwards. So it greatly improved the quality of the water in there, and that's because it reduced the amount of sediment that was going in. So last year, between the lockdowns, we managed to get out and get our volunteers out onto the river to do some more revetments. And so we had a couple of landowners who allowed us to do revetments. They had significant problems with erosion, and there was some other work to be done as well. So we did some fencing and tree planting and things like that. So there's loads of volunteer opportunities here. So it's, you don't necessarily have to get into the river. It's not always about that. There's plenty of things to do with managing the work site and, helping people out, the volunteers that are working, handing the materials, or, we have refreshments and lunch and breaks, and that's very important that that's monitored and managed. So there's lots of kind of different jobs. One particular job with the revetments is that we have to collect brash. A lot of people like doing that. It's tough work, but it's really just, you have to let everything else go when you do that, because, it takes your mind off things completely. And people always say that to us when they're collecting brash. It's a real break from kind of life in a way, So, so we were filmed by Eco Eye a few years ago when we were doing some of our brash collection, and we were doing that for this particular project, for this Connaghan restoration project that we were working on. But on the bottom right there, you can see one of our volunteers does diving, and he was diving the site for us, because we need to know exactly what we're doing on the site prior to kind of deciding and putting in the structures. So that kind of knowledge is really important. And so we have people who can do diving and observations and things like that for us as well. So here we are working on the river at the time. Luckily enough, we got a couple of really good days to do this. And it's good fun, as I said, and there's always plenty of tea. So this is the results of the work. So, sometimes, it's very important as a volunteer that you feel that you've done something. And, I've volunteered all my life, and I really like to see, the outputs of what we've done, and to see the solutions and things working. And so this is an example of what we did that day, or those 2 days. So this is day one, is before we started. Okay, so lots of boulders and things at the side of the bank, which weren't helping with the erosion. Day two, when we were actually putting it, started off getting the site ready, that's removing the boulders, because the boulders weren't working. So we removed the boulders, preparing the site for the revetment. And then on the third day, we put the revetment in. So it just happens over 1 or 2 days. So this was mostly done on one day. You have to get it done on one day, really, so that it's secure enough, because you might have a flood you know, at the overnight or something, and then it might all wash away. So you have to make sure that it's all done in the one day. So having a good group of volunteers that work together to get that done fairly quickly is very important. So further on downstream, we did another revetment here. So this was on one of the days when we were doing that. And this is it 6 months later. So you can see how effective it is. We also did fencing and planting along here, but you can see how much that this revetment has actually filled up with sediment. So instead of the landowner having lost all this chunk of land here, it's now filling up again. And in a few years' time, that'll be completely filled in and solid ground. I mean, these are already particularly solid revetments because this river holds a lot of sediment. And so these have filled up very, very quickly. Another thing that we are looking at and trying to do more of this is improving fish passage. So we're really looking at what are the barriers for fish, because movement in a river is very important, and not just really for the fish, but also just in terms of you know, the sediment transport in a river, which is very important to how a river works. This is one of the reasons why we look at bridges, because we can see which ones are barriers, which ones might be a barrier. But also we like then to kind of maybe solve that issue. So this particular bridge, which was beside the revetment, was posing a barrier to fish. It wasn't a complete barrier, but it was certainly a difficult one for the fish to overcome. So what we did is we got wooden baffles and installed them. So we had our volunteers around that day. There was about 6 of us working on this. And this has made a huge difference to the fish passage for the river. From an average flow of 5 centimeters, we're now up to 20 centimeters. And that's, you know, even in low water, then we're still, you know, this would have dried up in low water, this bridge apron, but now it'll always have water on it and always of a depth that's suitable for fish to pass. So this is just a kind of a technical slide on the outcomes of that, but we had 13 volunteers working with us. And overall, between all the sites that we did on the river, we did 4 different sites, and then there was fencing and planting and pasture pumps. It was 7 days work in total, and that was 13 volunteers and 2 contractors. So we did 78 meters of bank revetment, and the outcomes then were that it was, you know, they're working really well, they're trapping sediment, and they are improving the habitat for the animals, and the farmers are very, very happy with what's happened with them. So just to summarize, you know, from an environmental perspective, providing a variety of opportunities is really important. For our work, it's really important, and we like to provide all different types of opportunities at all different levels for people of all different skill levels as well. So active participation, we find as well, really helps to increase their volunteers' enjoyment of what we're doing. And you're meeting people, you're sharing experiences, you're learning, and it's all outdoors, which is brilliant from a COVID perspective. And then, you know, my background's in science and zoology, eco-volunteering, so important. This is, you know, one of the reasons why I live in Donegal, is because I first came to Donegal to volunteer in Glenveigh National Park. And I loved Donegal so much, I just really wanted to move here, and eventually I did. But it's just to remember at the moment that we are in a biodiversity crisis, and the more people that we can get out there doing things for the environment, the better. So hopefully you'll all get outside later on this week and start doing something out there for the environment. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Trish. Can I ask you just to stop sharing? Perfect, so we can all see each other again. Trish, thank you so much. That was so interesting. I love the way that, you know, some of it is so technical that you have QR codes that I don't really understand, and other parts of it are so physical that you're just in a river up to your waist, throwing bits of trees around. Now I'm sure they're, you know, it's just fantastic, and it's great to see the impact you have on the river, but additionally the training and the supports that you offer to the volunteers, that, you know, they're not there just to haul rocks or to move stuff. They're actually part of the team, and they understand it, and they get that reward of, I suppose, a job well done, but additionally the training aspect as well. So no, that's just fantastic. I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything for around the work that Trish is doing.
Hi Trish, can you hear me?
Yeah, Catherine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, Trish. I'm actually very glad I tuned in this morning. So what I'm interested in is, are those initiatives, the River Guardian initiatives, only in Inishowen, or are there any other parts of Donegal that have a similar program?
Well, no, it's just Inishowen, but people from outside of Inishowen can come and be part of the River Guardians program here. I mean, we would love for it to spread beyond Inishowen as well, because it's not just about the rivers of Inishowen, it's about all of the rivers. Like, we would like to see all of the rivers improved. So and we're all connected anyway via our rivers. I mean, the Foyle system is one of the largest in Ireland. So if you are outside of Inishowen, just get in contact, and you can come and train with us, and then maybe bring it back to your own area, and maybe you have a group.
It's the first time I've ever heard of it, and it strikes me that if the word got out there, I suspect there could be a lot. I'm in Letterkenny, and I suspect there could be a lot of people who'd be interested, but it's maybe not aware of your initiative. And if people were interested and started going up as a group, that maybe then that group could set up. But it's getting the word out there, I'd say,
I think there's a few, like, we have some people coming over from West Donegal to train with us now this Saturday. So, like, some people do know, and, they're engaging. We get people from, across from the north, Derry, Dundalk. We get people from Limerick and Mayo coming to our training. So we've had people from all over who train with us and then bring it back to their areas. But we're also, Catherine, like, we cover the Inishowen Municipal District. So we're actually quite close to Letterkenny, and we do have volunteers we have one volunteer based in Letterkenny who does work for us on the south of Inishowen. So it's open. It's open to everyone. I mean, it's lovely for us to have people who work on our local rivers, but if you can work on your own local river, then that's great.
Yeah, okay, no, that's great. Thank you. I'll definitely sign up for the training anyway, see where it takes me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Catherine,
yeah.
I suppose on that, Catherine, if you would have got the email invite for this, so if you shoot us in an email, we'll put you in touch with Trish. So there's a question in from Kyle Sweeney as well, and thank you, Kyle. And it's equally, if you don't want to unmute, you can stick a question into the chat. Is the water chemistry equipment easy to use to monitor the river pollution? That would be a question I would have as well, Trish.
Right. Very easy. I mean, it's one of the issues about water chemistry is that it can be very technical. And what Rivers Trust try to do is make it that bit easier or more understandable. We have the EPA coming to train us next, it's the 10th of June, actually. It's an online workshop. But what we've done is we've supplemented this with instructional videos to show people how to do it. And then we will give out the kits after that. So the kits are things like, you can get these little strips, and all you do is you take the strip and you dip it in the water, and then you test it against a color card. Okay. So that's very, very easy. Then we have other ones which are, it's like a little tube, and there's a little pin, a little bit of powder in it, and you take a water sample. So you actually don't even have to get into the river. You can just throw a bucket in. So even if you can do it off a bridge as well. So just throw a container and collect the water. There's a little pin, you take out the pin, you get a little bit of water, you draw up the water into the vial, and it's a color change as well. So very, very easy to do. It is very important that it is easy. But what we also like people to sort of pick up gradually is to understand what it means. So, you can send us the results and say, well, it's 0.2 micrograms per litre. What does that mean? Is that good? Is that bad? So we want people to understand whether it is good or bad. And so, is your river suffering a bit? Is it under a bit of pressure? Are there some, sort of, the water chemistry doesn't necessarily tell you what exactly is happening, but it tells you if there's a pressure. Okay, so so for instance, something like conductivity will tell you there's an issue, but it won't tell you what the issue is. Okay. So then it's like being a detective then, a water detective, you working out what the problem is. But it is very, very easy to do, Kyle. So and you do get training on it anyway. So
that's fantastic, Trish. Thank you very much. Right, if we're all okay, I can't see Daniel there now, but hopefully he hasn't dropped off. Daniel, are you there?
As need to admit him into the room again.
Oh, he's just coming back in. He's trying to be dramatic. That's what he's at.
Yeah.
So no, Trish, look, thank you very much. That was really informative, and we'll share the talk out through our system as well, because we want more people to be aware of the work that you are doing up there and how we can impact that work across the rest of the county as well.
Great. Yes, anytime. We have a website too that you can check out there, and our contact details are there as well. But as you say, John, if they want to contact you, we can send on some information. We have a newsletter as well, and our latest newsletter had a list of some of the courses that are coming up with dates, so people can start booking them.
That's fantastic. Okay, Daniel, we'll pivot to you now. You're welcome back. You were trying to make a dramatic entrance there.
No.
Look, if that happens, look, if we all lose internet connectivity, we just come back to the room and we keep going. So yeah, Daniel, look, yeah, we'll hand over to yourself now. Thank you, Trish.
Yeah, thank you, Trish, for that. That was really good. I'm definitely going to look into getting involved. Actually, I'm a part of the Clough angling group here, doing some ecological restoration on the Rye and Tullow Begley. So I'll definitely be in touch. But yeah, I'm glad to be back. That was, of course, a very good timing from Zoom to disconnect. I'll try and share my screen here. Let me see. Okay. So can people see this in slideshow view? Is that all right? Okay, great. So the title of my talk is Connecting with Nature, Finding Your Feet in the Green World. And I'm very grateful to John for the opportunity to talk about this, because it's something that I rarely get the chance to talk about, I guess, as a professional ecologist. I work for Birdwatch Ireland, but I've worked as a ecological consultant for quite some time. And before before that, I was a botanist. So I basically, my current work with Birdwatch Ireland is in the Letterkenny branch, where I'm designing conservation objectives for a number of special areas of conservation across Donegal, as well as working with landowners to try and implement kind of conservation improvement to their land, usually with regards to blanket bog habitat or associated kind of unusual or declining species of plants and animals, such as curlew or all the lovely stuff that we have in Donegal. But my talk today will be on a more personal note. It'll be talking about sort of how to kind of foster and deepen a connection with nature. It's a topic that I've had over my whole life and has resulted in me becoming an ecologist and conservationist. But I just kind of wanted to throw out a question, I suppose, that we could kind of keep in mind together over the course of the talk. How have you connected with nature over the last year? And the key word, I think, is how. What methods work for you, and what methods have resulted in you noticing things of the natural world around us. And we'll go through in the talk and kind of discuss a few ones which I've tried out and a few ones which I've found useful. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. So nature during lockdown, I think a lot of us, as we had kind of our 5K limits around us, were forced to sort of notice things that maybe we wouldn't have otherwise noticed. Like all of a sudden you could hear, birds calling, and you could notice plants growing when usually you'd be at the office or you'd be working. It's been obviously, very difficult, but it's also forced all of us, I think, to take some moments of stillness and to actually kind of force us to come back to our surroundings, because we can't leave them. And the another sort of useful thing that I've found in particular during this period has been the beauty of the natural environment around us. That, like, when I look out at a field and I see curlew, or I see, birds or plants growing, it's, there's not necessarily a pandemic on for them. That it's something that's an external world to us and our concerns, that but that we can find ourselves in, and that we very much come from. And we're lucky here in Donegal. We have a lot of beautiful natural environments nearby. We have golden eagles, and we have beautiful mountains and red-throated diver and all sorts of birds that are, very unique in Ireland, and globally, and we're very blessed with the ability to have wild places nearby that we can visit here in Donegal. And that's been one of the more gratifying sort of experiences that I've had since I've come here. My family is from Falkirk, and so I've kind of been finding my place in it. So I just wanted to talk briefly about the actual benefits of nature connection, because we all often, I think, can relate to the fact that we feel more relaxed after a walk in the forest. But the idea that there are, in peer-reviewed scientific journals, in high impact peer-reviewed scientific journals, there are actual proven physiological effects from nature connection, I think is a pretty potent message. That, like, for instance, that last one where in one study in New York, it was all other things being equal, so removing sort of other confounding variables, patients with bedside windows that looked out on leafy trees on average healed a day faster, needed significantly less pain medication, and had fewer post-surgical complications. I mean, like, the idea, or the second to last one, where it's a Dutch study that shows that 15 out of 24 disease clusters, and this was among a sample size of 10,000 or more, I think it was 12,000, was lower in living environments with more green space in a 1 kilometer radius. And that's a strong relationship, in particular with anxiety disorders and depression, but also with others. There's a proven link between even listening to birdsong for 15 minutes or watching an animal. So they had people watch birdsong and then try and solve very difficult math equations. And then they tested their saliva for levels of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And it was proven to have a significant effect, just even listening to birdsong. And, a lot of this is intuitive, but it is also striking that our actual bodies respond to being in nature, because we evolved there. It makes sense that we have a direct relationship to and with the environment, because for most of our human history, we have been out there. It's a relatively recent shift to urban living, as many of us do. So I just wanted to throw that in just briefly. And yeah, getting outside is the first step of connecting with nature a lot of the time. There are, as I said, about 55% of us now live in cities. The average European spends 93% of their time indoors. These are things that are relatively new in terms of our, psychological landscape. So in my mind, it is a greater priority to keep that connection with the outdoors and with the environment that we came from. Good places to go, just from an ecological point of view, are often edges of different habitats, are bodies of water, places where there's food, or resources that animals or plants need. And there's a lot we can do to encourage nature in our own gardens, such as growing diverse strips of wildflowers, like on the right there, or providing resources like bird boxes or bat boxes. But the thing is, you don't need these wild spaces, or you don't even necessarily need to get outside. Like, this was my view from when I worked as an ecological consultant in London, and there's not a lot of green there. Like, you don't need to constantly have a windswept moor nearby. Sometimes it's fine to have, we had a tree that was out the window that was enough that I could mark the changing of the seasons. You could see what birds used it. You could all of a sudden start to notice things that changed in cycle with the turning of the weather. And over the course of a year or 2 years, even though you're in a very artificial and urban environment, you can still form a connection to the natural world wherever you are, even if that's having a a house plant inside or a bird table outside that you like to sit and look at it. There's ways that everyone can do this, and I think it's very important for us to do this, to connect with nature in order to foster that ecological awareness and ecological relationship that's so important. So I'm now going to discuss a few practices, I suppose, for nature awareness. It's how to encounter nature on its own terms. Oftentimes, when I go out for a walk, or when I go out to sort of walk the stretch of land here, I find myself caught up in what I've been working on, or the problems of the day, or the kind of the concerns that I bring with me out into the environment. And a lot of these practices are supposed to basically allow enough stillness and mindfulness, really, to sort of be able to observe what's actually there in the world around you, and not to be not to disturb it, to simply witness what's there. Because at the end of the day, a lot of ecology and a lot of conservation is rooted in observation of the natural world. Ecologists like myself, 100 years ago, would just sit beside a field for their whole life and observe it over them and come up with 4 scientific papers about it, oftentimes. So anyway, there's many approaches, such as nature writing, yoga, eating your meals outdoors, going camping or hill walking, swimming in wild lakes. All of these things, I might add, Donegal is particularly good for. You can wild camp in Glenveigh. There's an endless amount of lakes if you have enough appetite to swim in. But I'm just going to go through a few practices which have worked for me, because those are the ones that I feel I can talk about. This is the idea of having a sit spot. So this is my sit spot on the right. I just took this photo just before the talk, actually. And it's a place where you can return to again and again, and have it as a practice that it's a grounding point in nature where you return to it, and ideally daily, but I've struggled with daily, so as often as you can, I would say. But it's the commitment to returning to it and being open to seeing what's there in one place again and again. I find, like I say, when I go there, sometimes I'll go and I'll sit and I'll just be still. And sometimes, for instance, mindfulness or closing your eyes and kind of arriving at the place can help. But what really adds value to this is the routine of going there, because over time you start to notice little changes, things that you can't predict, that start to be ways into knowledge and understanding of the ecosystem around you, and also other places, as we'll see. A good kind of way to mix it up, in my mind, is to approach your sit spot, to choose it based on, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you can choose it on a large spot of land, or it could be looking out the window at a bird table that you have, and you're able to see out of where you work, and you can spend 5 minutes a day looking at what's on the bird table. Whatever it is, commit to it and try and bring that routine into your life on a regular basis. Approaching a sit spot a different way, geographically, when you go there, can change the way you look at it. Seeing it in all weather and times of the day. I camp at mine occasionally. That's really how you gain this knowledge of what is going on when you're not around, basically, is what you're trying to find out. Forest bathing, this is a similar idea. It's a Japanese concept. I personally haven't participated in a forest bathing under the particular name, but it's a similar practice, I'd say. And it's kind of similar in that, like, you can choose a forest, for instance, or any natural environment where the point is not to necessarily exercise or to go hiking or jogging. Anyone of any fitness level can do this. But it's about slowing down and allowing enough calmness that you can actually encounter the place, and to really focus on the sensory inputs that you get from a forest. In forest bathing in particular, you focus on what do you hear exclusively? What do you see if you look at it from a different angle, from low down on the ground or up high? What do you smell? Can you smell, the moss? Can you smell fungus? Can you smell the soil? These kind of things. And yeah, but it's not bathing per se as in the water, but I've added that last bit, But what's key to both these sort of practices is using your senses, really. I mean, our senses evolved in these environments in order for us to distinguish things which were food or threats to us. So, they're there for the using, but we often don't use them in a modern urban setting as we used to. So it takes an effort now for us to really focus on the ability to kind of use our sensory inputs as we did before. Go slow. Like the number one issue I'd say is that oftentimes people go too fast and miss a lot of what nature is there. There's often nature in places that you don't, or there's often natural stories and natural history in places which are overlooked or you walk right past. I mean, some of the rarest mosses that I've found as an ecologist have been on people's lawns, where they just, it's often not where you expect it, change your perspective. Don't be afraid to kind of to allow yourself the allowance to sort of really get down in the mud and like look at what's there, and to be patient as well. Oftentimes when we arrive, birds will notice us arriving at the sit spot, and it takes time before animals and birds calm down. Sitting for 20 minutes is often a really good time, because birds will then shift from being in alarm mode to sort of being, you'll hear them call differently. They'll change their calls from alarm calls to calls about territory or about breeding. And all of a sudden you start to get a front row seat to sort of actual animal behavior, what it looks like when they're not worried about, a human. So it's important to kind of bring patience and stillness into nature observation, I would say, in order to really kind of connect with it. Unstructured time in nature, is kind of the name of the game a lot of the time. Like half the time, maybe, it's not time wasted trying to be curious about, if you are walking along and you see a trail and you wonder where that goes, to have time to follow it or to observe, to see if you can find tracks or that kind of thing. Allow yourself to be curious and to kind of follow what you see, because there's a lot to look at. And there are, concerns, and getting cold, getting wet in Donegal is definitely a concern, which has often happened. But, insects in summer in the bogs, getting dirty and muddy. These things are, you don't have to do them in order to encounter nature, but they're also, I sometimes view it as just, it's the price of admission to kind of, to the natural world, like a few bug bites, but if you get to be close, sitting somewhere when a deer walks past, you're going to remember that, for a very, very long time, at least in my experience. So yeah, so don't be afraid to kind of give yourself allowance to sort of encounter nature on its own terms. These are a few kind of things which I've found, perhaps for people who are already interested in nature, but are looking for ways to maybe deepen or try different approaches to kind of investigating the natural world. I found these to be really interesting. Animal tracking is a very interesting, and it's basically just nature observation at its core. But there is a whole understanding of looking at trails and trying to figure out what animal is on your land, or looking at small signs, and you start to get another angle on the ecology of an ecosystem that's around you. Bird watching, of course, I've been a bird watcher for a very long time, and these hobbies are cheap as well. There's not a lot of barrier to do this. You can buy a cheap pair of binoculars. You don't need an expensive spotting scope or something to go out and start seeing birds and starting to identify them. Anyone can do it from your backyard. Bat detecting is an interesting one as well. This bat detector is oftentimes the one that I'll suggest. It's a heterodyne bat detector. It's quite cheap as well. It's a cheap model, but it's good. And again, that's another way of sort of opening up natural history stories around us that we might not see. You know, if you turn a bat detector on, it detects ultrasound frequencies from bats as they're foraging. And you know, you can be sitting in your backyard and turn it on, and all of a sudden you hear these kind of alien clicks and whistles, oftentimes all night, and oftentimes you know, a huge amount of bats. And you realize that even though it's silent to you, to your human ears, you know, there's actually a whole cut and thrust of the natural world around you, you know, at all times. Wildlife cameras as well, you know, you can buy them pretty cheap online. They're really good for kind of confirming what you think. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. I guess the idea is, when approaching these kind of topics, is to have sort of the mindset of a detective or a journalist. You know, like, you start with kind of the what questions, based on your observations. You might go to your sit spot, or you might go out on your next walk, and you might notice a weird colored mushroom and think, you know, what mushroom's that? Or you might hear a bird and see it fly up, and it comes back and roosts under your eaves, and think, like, what is that bird? So it starts with what questions, you know, and the journey just for learning about sort of what bird is this, what sound is that in the next field, that's extensive enough. That is where you start gaining knowledge from field guides and from other experts and other people who are other hobbyists, about what's there. But once you start to learn, you can start to differentiate what's there. If it's a kind of pattern recognition, if you learn what a buzzard looks like or a house martin, all of a sudden the only thing you'll be seeing around you are buzzards and house martins. Or if you learn how to differentiate a particular type of flower, it'll seem like all of a sudden there's that exact flower everywhere. And the thing is, once we start to learn the names of things, we can understand how they change over time, and we can understand when they're lost or when they're back. So it's a very important and powerful question, is what is that? And it's usually where we start. We move on to sort of like how questions, you know, like how was the animal walking through here? How does the plant, you know, produce seed? Similarly with when, you know, these are all ways that we can kind of use, these are all tools, I suppose, that we can use to investigate our natural world around us, and use our sort of analytical facilities as humans to kind of bring ourselves into a deeper awareness about our environment. And the why questions, I feel, are sort of the deeper ones. You know, why is there a corncrake in this field as opposed to that field? And why do salmon spawn in this river and not that river? And these are questions that bring us deeply into ecology and directly into the idea of how the natural world changes around us. And you start to really understand, you know, it brings you into everything. Why are leaves this shape as opposed to that shape? And then you start looking at how it's evolved. These things interplay with each other until well, I mean, in my experience, until you're an ecologist. But then you know, an ecological awareness is, I feel like, it's asking these questions in good faith without the preconceptions, I suppose, of what you might expect the answers to be. Because a lot of times, you know, I myself, for instance, will expect certain animals to be here on this field, and if I see evidence of something that doesn't fit my preconceptions, I'll often, you know, I won't give it the proper credence. It's very easy to do, but it's these questions are useful to really force you to justify what you think, and like to force you to kind of observe more, basically, is what they're for. And what they really go to is sort of kind of clarifying a story about what's happening there. So for me, the idea of of sit spot, of having a place where you're rooted in nature, is very complementary and in a lot of ways linked to the idea of telling a story about what happens. You know, like think of a story of the day kind of approach, where it's you go to your sit spot and you come back and then you think about, you know, what's changed today? What was the story? Did nothing happen? Were there just, all I could do was I could hear crows and it was foggy and cold, and you know, that was it. But other days you might go and you'll say the flower is, you know, starting to form, and then 2 weeks later you'll notice that the flower has, you know, by telling stories we start to compile ecological and natural history information, and we start to actually record a chronicle of ourselves as observers as well in nature journaling. And it's a very old thing, you know, like as people, we always were, you know, you'd sit around the fire and talk about what you saw when you were hunting, you know, like these are things that we've always done and we have the facilities to do. But in our modern world, I've found that these are useful, useful prods to actually get yourself to do it. So there on the right is for instance an example from my own nature journal, where I've kept one from the time I was very young, and it's now at the point where I can kind of go back and look at different stages and different animals all through the thing, and see how I've, you know, you at a certain point are chronicling your own development as well. That book on the left is a very good book on nature drawing and journaling, which I'd recommend to anyone who is interested in it. But yeah, these are some other examples. This is when I was working in field work, and you know, different types of journals work for different people, or different stories, I suppose, work for different people. You can have combinations of text and writing, which I do in terrible handwriting. But I often, you know, keep some environmental conditions written down as well. Was it windy? Was it rainy? The one on the right is a good example where I forgot to add the year and deeply regretted it later, where I was trying to place what year it was, because it's now been quite a long time ago. But if you add other information into your journaling, like what is the weather, what time of day is it, these things are all relevant to the ecology that you're actually seeing, and they're highly relevant. If you look over a long period of time, you start to see trends, and you start to see things that are actually really, you know, personal and relevant information for where you are in your environment. It's not always about writing, you know. I've done times where I've recorded, you know, I've taken dictaphones out and recorded birds or recorded sounds of the environment. Sometimes it's just a checklist. Sometimes it's checklists that you have of the birds that come to your bird feeder, and or the animals which, you know, you find a track of on a walk. Those things are also a way of chronicling our interactions and telling this story of the day, you know. And they're all powerful tools that we can use in our arsenal. An example of the type of story from this year that that is a good example is on January 6th. I apologize for my handwriting, but you can see at the bottom, I basically have seen some sort of animal trails out on the land, and I'm wondering, what is it? Is it a fox? Is it a badger? Is it rabbits? Is it a hare? I'm trying to go through what the possible candidates are, and in my mind, I've kind of discarded the fact that it could be badgers. I've thought, you know, this was a very gradual process. When I noticed it, the trails, I started drawing them and mapping them, and I didn't rush ahead on the answer. I tried to kind of keep an inquisitive approach where I could try and find out what is there without jumping ahead to the answer. But eventually, you know, I did jump ahead to the answer and put out a wildlife camera, which again, as I showed earlier, was quite, you know, they're quite affordable. And I realized then that it's everything. It was hares, it was rabbits, it was foxes, it was badgers. And like I, in my mind, had totally discounted the idea that there were badgers on the land. And again, it was kind of a powerful message of saying, like, you know, your preconceptions that you approach color how you observe the natural world. And in a similar way, using a trail camera gave me the tools to basically to continue and take different types of observations about what I was seeing, to say, okay, now I can think about how a badger moves, and I can look at it on a trail camera and see how that relates to a trail. And the next time that I'm out on any field as an ecologist or as a wildlife biologist, and I see if I see a trail that reminds me of these kind of things, I'll instantly think badger, and I think probably badger, hare, fox. It's a multi-species trail. But this is just an example of the type of stories that you start to learn, basically, as you kind of practice your nature observation skills. So these are a few, I suppose, of my take-home or outdoors somewhere kind of messages. It's possible for everybody to connect with the natural world. It's our default mode that we've evolved in, and it's very good for us as well because of that. It's not expensive. It's not like fancy even. All it takes is being able to be to give yourself the allowance to go slow, to be observant, to see what's actually there, and to be present with your environment, really. I mean, that at the end of the day is what it is. And it's as natural as anything else we could do, because we're as much a part of it as the badgers are walking around the land. So experiment and see what works for you. You might not want to go and like set up a camp at the top of Glenveigh, but like you might just start small and try and identify one plant on your walk that you go on every day, and try and see, okay, if I can figure out what that is, then I'll understand it. Or one a week, the smaller you start, maybe the more you can see what works for you. We all have to find our own sort of way of doing it, but I think it is important, like Trish talked about. I mean, we are in a biodiversity crisis, and we're in a climate crisis, and we're also increasingly disconnected from the natural world. And that like these ways of observing things naturally, I believe, bring people into a understanding of what environmental stewardship is and what responsibility we have for the natural world. I mean, if you don't notice things that are there and then they're gone, if you don't notice it, then it's very difficult to effectively conserve it. And I say that as a conservationist. It's the idea that observation is really the key to unlocking our understanding of the natural world around us and our role in it. And it's a very important thing, I think, in the coming decades that we all give ourselves allowance to do. And it's also really nice. It'll also drop your cortisol levels, and maybe help you in a lot of ways. So these are a few further resources that I just wanted to drop in. I'm sure the talk will be sent out. There's a few of these that are really good. This first one is Awfully Plant Heritage. They're doing a really good series on their YouTube channel. They have this person who's written the book literally on kind of folklore and general scientific usage of plants in Ireland. And he's doing one video, and he's been doing them for about a year, to very low view counts, about various common plants of Ireland. And he'll do a 10-minute talk where he gives you the greater kind of context and the stories behind each of these. So like he'll pick one and talk about rosebay willowherb that's in season, and then he'll talk about what people used to use it for and what makes it special. And these kind of things are ways of learning about the stories behind the natural world that's around us. A lot of people have trouble with plant identification, which is understandable. There's an app called PlantNet, which takes all the work out of it. You can actually just take a photo of it, and it's a crowdsourced kind of thing that identifies the plant as it is. So if you go out and you see a plant on your walk again and again, and you're like, what is that? There's a fair bet that if you put it on PlantBet and take a photo of the leaves or the flowers, usually you'll find out what it is, and then you can go and check out what John has to say about it on the Awfully Plant Heritage site. In terms of in Donegal, there are a number of other groups that kind of run nature awareness things. Wild Awake is one. I've never participated in it, but it's pretty much the only one in Ireland. And they've paired with a rewilding site in the Derry Bays. Basically, so a site which is trying to restore a large area back to ecological integrity and to good ecological health, to kind of run nature awareness courses, to run foraging courses for like wild ingredients, wild skills like being able to camp outside and find your shelter, build it with wood. So if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in, those are definitely worth checking out in Donegal. John Brown Jr., he's an American writer and tracker, but he's written a good book on nature observation and tracking, just called that has a lot of really useful sort of exercises that you can do that are kind of like, go out and, form a frame with your hand and just really focus on what's in that, or draw that kind of thing, that like are kind of a workbook that you can go through. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the NHBS, which has all sorts of, you could spend a fortune on there buying moth traps and, everything, everything under the sun. But, and then, yeah, Birdwatch Ireland as well. We run a number of citizen science sort of projects, such as Spring Alive, where you report, the first occurrence of birds that arrive back in spring, such as cuckoos, swifts, martins. These kind of, and it's been going on for a number of years, and you report the first date where you see your first swallow, for instance. And we're able then to turn those individual natural history observations into a ecological and natural historical narrative about how the arrival times of birds in Ireland shift, and all of these other things. There's scientific data in all of our nature observations. Also in Ireland, there's the Corncrake Life Project. I know there's some work up in Inishowen. There's also a lot around us in Falcarra, because it's an SPA here. And also further down the west coast. They're always doing things, and I think they're doing a sort of outreach program at the Songhouse in Falcarra, I think, this coming weekend. That's the book on forest bathing. It's a good one. And then Micro Adventures as well. It's maybe geared more towards people who, are working a 9-to-5 or a 9-to-6 or a 9-to-7 job and want to be able to do this, but don't feel like they have the time. So in that case, the whole idea is that like these little things that you can do, he says between 5 and 9, so 5 p.m. and 9 a.m. the following day, that you can go out and you can, go out and have a bonfire. But it's about 120 ideas in this book, and they're all really good. And the overall philosophy behind it is one of kind of, you can do it. The barrier is really low. You can get out and find something that works for you. And then finally, of course, you can join Birdwatch Ireland and get a copy of Wings, which is our quarterly magazine, which I write for occasionally, and basically updates about bird life in Ireland, as well as conservation issues, and bird detectives for kids, with the Garden Bird Survey, which adults also can partake in, and we regularly do, and a guide to the common birds of Ireland. So if that interests you, please check our website, because COVID has hit us very badly because we can't run in-person meetups. So if you're not a member, I would strongly ask that you consider it. And myself, I'm always happy to answer questions about anything like this or talk about it. So I've put my contact details there, and I have a YouTube channel myself as well, where I'm trying to find my first corncrake where I can see it. And I'm currently trying to make a few videos like that. But anyway, that's my talk. So thank you very much.
Daniel, that was fantastic. I'm all chilled out and relaxed thinking about nature. It was a mindfulness session as much as anything else. So no, thank you so much. That was really, really good. And just really interesting to go beyond, I suppose, that concept of a sit spot. I, over the past few months, have been out in the fields a lot. We have a farm at home, and you notice things changing, not necessarily day to day or week to week, but you notice them when you go back, that maybe the gorse is back in flower again and stuff like that. And it's about repeatedly being in that one environment to actually be able to see it and be able to monitor it through. So no, thank you so much for that. I'll throw open, is anybody any comments or questions or anything, or are we all just too relaxed? yeah, just Sharon came through there just to say that how interesting it was, and thanks to both of you for your talks. It is, Daniel. I suppose, yeah, we'll, if you both send on your slideshows, we'll add them to the video going out to everybody, equally to those who couldn't be here today as well, just to share with those that were interested. No, it is. It's a very, very interesting topic.
Yeah, I'll just say something from the volunteer centre as well. We're delighted with the presentations there, because our theme for this week was well-being environment, and I think both of you stepped effortlessly across those two themes, and it was an eye-opener for us, and thanks for the information. And we hope to work with you guys in the long term, because it's something that's of benefit to ourselves and nature in the county we're in. So thanks for that.
And thank you for having me on to speak. I mean, this is a topic I obviously love a lot, and you know, I'm happy to take it forward. You know.
Yeah, no, it is. It's fantastic. It's great to see the passion that you have for it. You know, that you're not just an ecologist. You've been doing this forever. You know, and the journals
Yeah.
and the pictures and stuff like that. And no, I think it is. It's great. It's great to see, and we look forward to you finding a corn crake.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Me too.
That's it. And is the idea that you'll actually physically find it, or just hear it, or know where it is in the field, or?
I mean, I'd like to see it, and now's the time of year that you can see one. So that's the goal. But we'll see how it goes. You know. But
There's photographs of them up on Facebook from Ironmore.
Yeah, I was out on Ironmore yesterday. Actually, I'm doing breeding bird surveys across the islands and in the west of Donegal, and yeah, I could hear one. So I'm getting close now. You know, I'm getting close.
No, it is, and it's that detective piece, which is fantastic. So yeah, there's a request in there for sharing the YouTube channel, so that's on the presentation. So we'll include it in
Grand.
in the mail going out, and what we'll do is we'll include your contact details just to share them as well. So no, look, guys, thank you so much. Unless anybody else has any burning comments, thank you. You've really made our morning. No, we're so impressed with the passion and the work that both of you do. And yeah, thank you for sharing it with us.
Thanks a lot for having me, and nice to meet you, Trish, and everybody else.
Guys, thank you.
Bye.
All right.